There are moments in history when everything changes. When the course of civilizations pivots on a single decision, a single word, a single breath held too long in a room full of enemies. This is the story of such a moment, and of the woman who carried the fate of billions on her shoulders without flinching. Ambassador Sienna Reeves had forgotten what real sleep felt like. For 18 months, she had lived on stimulants and sheer willpower, watching her species burn while politicians in distant chambers debated protocols. The scars on her soul were deeper than any weapon could carve. She had held the hand of a dying colony governor as he begged her to save his grandchildren. She had read casualty reports until the numbers stopped meaning anything. She had smiled at alien dignitaries who called the slaughter of human worlds unfortunate but necessary. Now she sat in her quarters aboard the diplomatic vessel Resolute, staring at a message that made her blood run cold. The Galactic Assembly was summoning humanity to accept terms of surrender. Not negotiate. Accept. As if humans were children being called to account for breaking a vase. Her second-in-command, Colonel Dmitry Volkov, stood by the door with his arms crossed. The man was built like a tank, with silver streaking through his dark hair and eyes that had seen too many friends die. He watched her with the patience of someone who knew better than to interrupt her thinking. "They think we're beaten," Sienna said quietly, not looking up from the message. "They think correctly," Dmitry replied. "Our border fleets are scattered. We've lost 6 colonies in the past year. The Scorith Dominion has triple our military strength, and the Assembly backs them." The Assembly. Sienna's voice dripped with contempt. 14 species who've carved up the galaxy like a pie and get upset when someone new wants a slice. She stood and walked to the viewport. Outside, stars streamed past in ribbons of distorted light as the ship traveled through fold space. Somewhere out there, human colonies were dying. Children were crying for parents who would never come home. Soldiers were fighting battles they couldn't win, buying time for a miracle that everyone knew wasn't coming. Except it was. Sienna turned back to Dmitry. "Contact Director Ramirez. Tell her it's time." His eyebrows rose. "Operation Nightfall? We've been bleeding for 18 months while they laughed at us. While they wrote their terms and planned our future like we were pets to be domesticated." Her hands clenched into fists. "They wanted us desperate. They wanted us weak. Let's show them what humanity does with desperation." Dmitry smiled, and it was a terrible thing to see. "I'll make the call." 3 days later, the Resolute docked at Celestial Nexus Station, the ancient seat of Assembly power. The station was older than human civilization, a massive structure of crystalline towers and flowing metal that seemed to defy physics. It hung in neutral space like a crown, broadcasting the message that the Assembly had always been here and always would be. Sienna's delegation was deliberately small. Herself, Dmitry, 2 junior diplomats named Park and Okafor, and 4 security personnel who looked uncomfortable in their dress uniforms. They walked through corridors filled with species that regarded humanity with everything from pity to open hostility. The Valorians passed by, their scales shimmering blue and gold, refusing to acknowledge the humans existed. The Kresh scuttled along the walls on 6 legs, their cluster eyes tracking every movement with predatory interest. The Lumini drifted by in their containment suits, beings of pure energy who considered organic life a curiosity at best. No one spoke to them. No one welcomed them. They were here to be judged, and everyone knew it. The assembly chamber was designed to intimidate. 14 platforms rose from the floor in a circle, each occupied by the representative of a member species. At the center, elevated above all others, sat Prime Arbiter Kesslin, a being whose species had been old when Earth's sun was young. His body was vaguely humanoid but covered in bark-like skin that pulsed with bioluminescent patterns. His eyes were completely black, reflecting nothing. Ambassador Reeves, Kesslin's voice resonated through translation devices, smooth and utterly without warmth. "You stand before the assembly to hear our judgment." Sienna bowed slightly, just enough to show respect without showing submission. Prime Arbiter, I am honored by the Assembly's attention. Honor. Commander Thrask of the Scorith Dominion leaned forward on his platform. He was massive, his reptilian body covered in crimson scales that caught the light like fresh blood. You speak of honor while your species spreads across space like a plague. You colonize worlds at a rate that violates every established protocol. You breed without regulation. You consume resources as if the galaxy exists solely for your benefit. We exist, Sienna replied calmly. Is that our crime, Commander? That we dare to grow and build and reach for the stars like every species in this chamber once did? You grow too fast, Counselor Mesh-Ira of the Valerian hegemony interjected. Her voice was musical, beautiful, and filled with contempt. In 2 centuries, you have established 47 colonies. It took my people 1,000 years to achieve comparable expansion. Your recklessness threatens the stability we have maintained for eons. Sienna looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of each representative in turn. Some looked away. Others stared back with open hostility. All of them had already decided humanity's fate. Stability, she repeated. Is that what you call a galaxy where younger species are kept in their place? Where growth is forbidden unless the old powers approve it? Where an attack on human colonies is called regrettable but justified? The Scorith action was a response to your provocations, Kesslin said. You were warned multiple times to slow your expansion. You refused. Consequences followed. 6 million dead on New Terra. Sienna's voice remained steady, but something hard had entered it. The Scorith bombarded civilian targets for 3 days. Medical facilities, schools, residential districts. We have the recordings. We have the evidence. And the Assembly called it a warning. A necessary one, Thrask growled. Your species needed to understand the cost of defiance. Sienna was silent for a long moment. Dimitri stood behind her, his hand resting casually near his sidearm. The other members of her delegation remained perfectly still, their faces carefully blank. The Assembly has prepared terms, Kesslin continued. You will listen. A holographic display materialized in the center of the chamber, showing a star map of human space. Red markers began appearing over colony worlds. The United Human Territories will cede the following 12 worlds to the Scorith Dominion as reparations for the conflict. You will pay resource tributes for 75 years. Your military fleet will be reduced to 20% of current strength. All new colonies must be approved by this Assembly. Your technological development will be monitored to ensure compliance with galactic standards. Each word felt like a hammer blow. 12 worlds. Millions of people. Generations of servitude. The complete castration of humanity's future. These terms are generous, Kesslin said. The Scorith initially demanded complete annexation of your territories. We have negotiated on your behalf. How kind, Sienna said softly. You should be grateful, Mesh-Ira added. Younger species rarely receive such consideration. Accept these terms, and humanity will be allowed to survive under proper guidance. Sienna looked down at her hands. They were steady. Everything she had prepared for, everything she had sacrificed, had led to this moment. Somewhere far away, hidden in the dark spaces between stars, other humans were moving. Ships were positioning. Weapons were coming online. The trap was closing. She looked up at Kesslin. Prime Arbiter, I request a recess. I must consult with my government before responding to these terms. Kesslin's expression didn't change. You have 3 hours. The Assembly does not appreciate delays. 3 hours will be sufficient. As Sienna turned to leave, Commander Thrask called out, his voice filled with satisfaction. Run back and beg your leaders to save you, human. It will change nothing. You are beaten. You simply lack the wisdom to accept it. Sienna paused at the doorway. She didn't turn around, but her voice carried clearly through the chamber. "Commander, in 3 hours you're going to learn something important about my species." "And what is that?" Now she did turn, just her head, just enough to meet his eyes. "We're very good at keeping secrets." The door closed behind her, and the chamber erupted in confused murmuring. None of them understood. None of them suspected. They saw a defeated enemy accepting inevitable surrender. They had no idea that the real war was about to begin. The private quarters assigned to the human delegation were small and deliberately austere, another calculated insult that Sienna barely noticed. She had lived in worse places during the war. Dmitri sealed the door behind them and activated a portable jamming device that would prevent electronic eavesdropping. The technology was human-made, something the assembly's sensors wouldn't recognize because they didn't know humans had developed it. "That went exactly as predicted," Dmitri said, his voice tight with controlled anger. "They've already carved us up and served us on a platter." "They think they have," Sienna corrected. She moved to the secure communication terminal and entered a complex series of codes. The screen flickered to life, showing the face of Director Isabella Ramirez, the woman who commanded humanity's deepest secrets. Ramirez was in her 60s, with steel-gray hair pulled back severely and eyes that had calculated the cost of every decision she'd ever made. Behind her, Sienna could see the operations center of Sanctuary Station, humanity's hidden fortress built inside a hollowed-out dwarf planet that no one knew existed. "Ambassador," Ramirez said. "I've been monitoring the assembly proceedings. They're offering you a slow death instead of a quick one." "Generous of them," Sienna replied dryly. "Is Nightfall ready?" "It's been ready for 6 months. Every battle group is in position. Every captain knows their orders. We're just waiting for your signal." Sienna felt the weight of what she was about to do settle over her shoulders. Once she gave this order, there would be no going back. Humanity would either rise to stand among the great powers of the galaxy, or they would be annihilated for their defiance. There was no middle ground left. "How many ships?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. 62,000 combat vessels across 15 battle groups. Another 100,000 support craft. We've stripped every resource, called in every favor, pushed our shipyards beyond any reasonable capacity. This is everything we have, Sienna. Everything we are." Park and Okafor, the junior diplomats, had gone pale. They had known something was planned, but not the scale of it. Dmitri simply nodded, his expression grim and satisfied. "They think we have maybe 5,000 ships left after the border wars," Sienna said. "Scattered and demoralized." "That's what we wanted them to think," Ramirez agreed. "Every ship they destroyed, every battle we lost, was a sacrifice to sell the illusion. We fought hard enough to seem desperate, but not hard enough to reveal our true strength." She paused. "Those losses were real, Sienna. 30,000 people died maintaining that deception. Their families still don't know why their loved ones weren't reinforced, why backup never came." Sienna closed her eyes briefly. She had signed those orders. She had watched colonies burn that could have been saved if they'd revealed their hidden fleets. The guilt was a living thing inside her chest, but she couldn't let it stop her now. "Execute Operation Nightfall," she said quietly. "All battle groups, simultaneous transition. Let's show them what humanity really is." Ramirez saluted. "For those who died in the dark." "For those who died in the dark," Sienna echoed. The screen went blank. Dmitri checked his chronometer. "The transitions will begin in 40 minutes. It'll take another 20 for the assembly to get confirmation from their various home worlds. We should head back to the chamber early, watch their faces when the reports start coming in." "No," Sienna said. "We wait the full 3 hours. Let them receive the news, let them panic, let them try to figure out what's happening. Then we walk back in there and explain it to them." The weight was excruciating. Sienna tried to rest but couldn't. She paced the small room, running through scenarios, preparing arguments, wondering if she had just condemned her entire species to extinction. Outside, the station continued its routine operations, unaware that the galaxy was about to change forever. 50 minutes after she'd given the order, Dimitri's personal communicator buzzed. He checked it and smiled. First confirmations are coming in. The Skorath home system is reporting massive fold space transitions. They're claiming sensor malfunctions. 10 minutes later, another buzz. Valerian core worlds. Same story. They're scrambling their defense fleets. The reports continued to flood in. Kresh territory. Lumini space. The Thorn reaches. The crystalline expanse. Every major power center in the galaxy was suddenly surrounded by human warships that had appeared from nowhere, bypassing every defensive system, every early warning network, every interdiction field that was supposed to make such movements impossible. When the 3 hours finally elapsed, Sienna straightened her uniform and checked her reflection one last time. She looked tired, which was good. Let them think the weight of defeat was crushing her. Let them prepare their magnanimous speeches about mercy and guidance. It's time, she said. They walked back through the corridors of Celestial Nexus Station, and this time Sienna noticed the difference. Aliens who had ignored them before now watched with barely concealed anxiety. Whispered conversations stopped as the humans passed. Something had changed, and everyone could feel it. The doors to the assembly chamber opened. Sienna walked to her assigned platform with measured steps, her delegation behind her. She did not sit. She stood straight and tall, her hands clasped behind her back, and waited. The chamber was chaos. Representatives were shouting at each other in a dozen languages. Holographic displays flickered with conflicting information. Commander Thrask was roaring at his aides, his scales flushed almost purple with rage. Counselor Meshira's usual composure had cracked, her hands trembling as she read reports. Prime Arbiter Kesslin raised all 4 of his arms, and silence gradually fell. His black eyes fixed on Sienna with an intensity that might have frightened her once. Now it just made her feel cold. "Explain," he said. "Explain what is happening in our territories." "I'd be happy to," Sienna replied calmly. "But first, I need to correct something Commander Thrask said earlier." "This is not the time for your human arrogance," Thrask snarled, but his voice lacked its earlier confidence. "He said we were beaten," Sienna continued as if he hadn't spoken. "He said we simply lacked the wisdom to accept it." I'm afraid the commander was operating under a fundamental misunderstanding. She activated her own holographic display, and the star map that appeared showed the entire galaxy. Blue markers, human markers, surrounded every major assembly world. 62,000 ships, all in defensive formations, all perfectly positioned. The chamber went silent. 18 months ago, when the Skorath attacked our colonies, we had a choice, Sienna said. We could commit everything to defending the border and probably lose slowly. Or we could accept casualties in the short term while preparing for something much larger. Impossible, Meshira whispered. The industrial capacity required, the resources, the coordination required. Humanity has 47 colonies and 28 billion people, Sienna replied. When we commit to something, we commit completely. We built shipyards in places you would never look because you thought you knew our capabilities. Asteroid belts. Rogue planets. The accretion disks of black holes. We built in the dark spaces of the galaxy while you watched our border fleets lose. You sacrificed your own people, one of the other representatives said, horrified. Those border colonies, those fleets. You let them die. Yes. Sienna's voice was hard. We did. Because if we had revealed our true strength too early, you would have united against us. All 14 assembly species working together could have crushed us. But if we appeared weak, desperate, defeated, you would grow complacent. You would write your unjust terms and demand our surrender, confident that we had no choice. She looked directly at Kesslin. You wanted us broken. We needed you arrogant. Both sides got what they wanted. This is an act of war, Thrask said, but his voice shook. You have violated our sovereign space with military vessels. Have we attacked anyone? Sienna asked. Have any of our ships fired a single shot? We have simply demonstrated that we can be anywhere we choose to be, whenever we choose to be there. Your interdiction fields, the technology that has kept the Assembly in power for 10,000 years, no longer works against us. The implications of that statement rippled through the chamber like a shockwave. Fold space interdiction was the ultimate weapon, the way the Assembly controlled younger species. Without it, their entire power structure was built on sand. How? Kesslin asked quietly. How did you bypass the interdiction? That's our secret, Sienna said. One we'll keep. But I will tell you what it means for the future. She took a breath, knowing that everything depended on the next few minutes. The terms you offered us are rejected. All of them. We will not cede our colonies. We will not pay tribute. We will not reduce our military. We will not submit to your guidance or your monitoring or your control. Then you choose extinction, Thrask said, rising from his platform. We will destroy every human world. We will hunt your species to the last child. You can try, Sienna said calmly. But consider the mathematics. You now know we have at least 62,000 warships, and you have no idea where our production facilities are. You know we can bypass your interdiction and appear anywhere without warning. You know that right now, human fleets surround your home worlds. She paused. If you attack us, Commander, what do you think we'll do? Do you think we'll politely keep our ships away from civilian targets like you did at New Terra? Or do you think we learned from your example? Thrask's claws extended, but he said nothing. Here are humanity's terms, Sienna continued, her voice carrying clearly through the stunned silence. We want a seat on this assembly. Full membership, full voting rights, full recognition as a sovereign power. We want reparations for the 6 colonies you destroyed while calling it justified. We want the officers responsible for targeting civilian populations turned over for trial. And we want a formal apology from this body for treating an unprovoked attack as if it were our fault. Unacceptable, Mesh-IRA said, but there was no force behind it. Then we have a problem, Sienna replied. Because those ships around your worlds? They're not going anywhere until we get what we want. We can wait. We're very patient. How long can your economies function with human fleets blocking your trade routes? How long before your people start asking why their leaders are so determined to oppose a species that's only asking for fairness? Kesslin's bioluminescent patterns pulsed rapidly, a sign of stress in his species. You are threatening the entire assembly. No, Prime Arbiter. I'm negotiating with it. There's a difference. Sienna's expression softened slightly. We don't want war. We've seen enough death. But we will not accept subjugation. We will not be made into pets or servants or cautionary tales. We are offering you a choice: accept us as equals, or try to destroy us and see how much it costs you. The chamber erupted in argument. Some representatives demanded immediate military action. Others counseled caution. A few, Sienna noticed, looked almost relieved that someone had finally challenged the assembly's authority. Kesslin let them argue for several minutes before raising his arms again. The assembly must deliberate. This session is recessed for 12 hours. Ambassador Reeves, your delegation will remain on station. Of course, Sienna said. We're not going anywhere. As she turned to leave, she caught Dimitri's eye. He gave her the slightest nod. They had done it. They had seized the attention of the entire galaxy and forced it to see humanity not as victims but as powers in their own right. Now they just had to survive the consequences. The 12 hours that followed were the longest of Sienna's life. In her quarters, she tried to rest but found herself staring at the ceiling, running through every possible outcome. Outside, Celestial Nexus Station buzzed with activity as representatives consulted with their home governments and military advisors calculated impossible scenarios. Dimitri brought her periodic updates. The Scoreth had attempted to attack the human fleet surrounding their home world and lost 47 ships without scratching a single human vessel. The message was clear: humanity wasn't bluffing about their capabilities. The Valorians had tried to negotiate separate terms, hoping to split the humans from their position. Sienna had refused. It was all or nothing now. Park, the younger diplomat, came to her 6 hours into the recess. The young man looked exhausted but determined. "Ambassador, I need to ask you something," he said quietly. "The people we sacrificed at the border. The colonies we could have saved. Were they told? Did they know their deaths were buying time for this?" Sienna met his eyes. No. They thought they were holding the line. They thought reinforcements were coming. They died believing they'd been abandoned. That's brutal. Yes, it is. Sienna's voice was steady. "I signed those orders, Park. I watched good people die when I could have saved them, because saving them would have revealed our strength. That weight is mine to carry, and I'll carry it until the day I die. But I won't apologize for it. Because it worked? Because the alternative was the extinction of our entire species. Sometimes there are no good choices, only terrible ones and worse ones. I chose terrible. I chose to let thousands die so that billions might live free. You can judge me for that if you want. History certainly will." Park was quiet for a long moment. "For what it's worth, Ambassador, I think you made the right choice. I just hope I never have to make one like it." "So do I," Sienna said softly. When the assembly finally reconvened, the atmosphere had changed dramatically. The arrogance was gone, replaced by wary calculation. These were beings who had lived for centuries, who had seen empires rise and fall, who understood power in ways humanity was still learning. They recognized what Sienna had done, and they respected it even as they hated it. Kesslin spoke first. "The assembly has deliberated. We have consulted with military experts, economic advisors, and historical scholars. We have examined every possible response to the current situation." Sienna waited, her heart pounding despite her calm exterior. "We have concluded," Kesslin continued, "that humanity has demonstrated both capability and restraint. Your fleets surround our worlds but have not attacked. You have shown strength without cruelty. This matters." Commander Thrask stood abruptly. "This is weakness. We should crush them while we still can." "Sit down, Commander," Kesslin said quietly. "Your species already tried to attack their fleet. How did that work out?" Thrask's scales flushed darker, but he sat. Kesslin turned back to Sienna. "The Assembly cannot accept all of your terms. To do so would undermine millennia of precedent and destabilize the entire galactic order. However, we recognize that the previous terms we offered were unjust." "Then let's discuss what justice actually looks like," Sienna said. What followed was the most intense negotiation of her life. It lasted for 6 more hours, with representatives arguing, compromising, and slowly finding common ground. The Valorians wanted guarantees about human expansion rates. The Kresh demanded technology sharing agreements. The Lumini insisted on cultural exchange programs. Sienna gave ground where she could and held firm where she couldn't. She agreed to voluntary limits on colony establishment, but refused mandatory ones. She accepted technology sharing on a mutual basis, but rejected any monitoring of human research. She committed to cultural exchanges, but insisted they work both ways. The hardest part was the question of reparations. The Scoreth flatly refused to pay for what they still considered a justified response to human expansion. Sienna nearly walked away over that, but Councillor Ven of the Thorn Reaches, a species that had remained mostly silent, offered a compromise. Let the Scoreth pay not to humanity directly, but into a fund for refugee resettlement and reconstruction, Ven said. Let it be framed not as punishment, but as investment in galactic stability. Pride is preserved, justice is served. It was clever, and Sienna accepted it after extracting a promise that humans would have equal say in how those funds were distributed. Finally, as station lights dimmed to simulate night cycles, Kesslin brought them to the central issue. The question of assembly membership, he said. This is unprecedented. No species has ever demanded a seat at this table. Seats are earned over centuries of proving wisdom and stability. No species has ever had the capability to bypass your interdiction before either, Sienna replied. Precedents are made to be broken when circumstances change. And circumstances have definitely changed. If we grant you membership, every other young species will demand the same. Then perhaps the Assembly should consider why you're so afraid of that. Is it because younger species lack wisdom, or because they might challenge decisions that benefit the old powers at everyone else's expense? Silence fell over the chamber. It was a dangerous question, one that struck at the heart of how the Assembly functioned. Finally, Meshire spoke. Perhaps both can be true, Ambassador. Perhaps we have grown comfortable in our authority and forgotten that we too were once young and hungry and desperate to be heard. Perhaps this discomfort we feel is not a sign that you are wrong, but that we have been wrong for far too long. It was the last thing Sienna had expected from the proud Valerian. Other representatives began nodding slowly. Provisional membership, Kesslin said at last. For a period of 50 years, during which humanity proves it can exercise power responsibly. Full voting rights, full access to assembly resources and knowledge bases, but with the understanding that this is an evaluation period. And at the end of 50 years? Sienna asked. If humanity has demonstrated wisdom and restraint, the provisional status becomes permanent. If you prove to be the threat some fear, it can be revoked. Sienna considered it. It wasn't everything she wanted, but it was more than she had dared hope for. Most importantly, it gave humanity time. Time to grow, to learn, to become truly strong enough that no one would ever threaten them again. I accept, she said. On behalf of the United Human Territories, I accept provisional membership in the Galactic Assembly. The chamber erupted in a mixture of applause and protests. Thrask stormed out, refusing to accept the decision. But most stayed, and most seemed relieved that bloodshed had been avoided. Kesslin approached Sienna privately after the formal session ended. Up close, his alien features were even more strange, but his eyes held something that might have been respect. You took a terrible risk, Ambassador, he said quietly. If we had called your bluff, if we had attacked despite your fleets, millions would have died. It wasn't a bluff, Sienna replied. If you had attacked, we would have responded with everything we had. But I didn't think you would. You've lived too long, seen too much death. You remember what war costs in a way that younger, more aggressive species like the Scoreth don't. You counted on our weariness. I counted on your wisdom. Sienna smiled slightly. You've spent 10,000 years maintaining peace through overwhelming force. I just gave you a way to maintain it through mutual respect instead. That's not weakness, Prime Arbiter. That's evolution. Kesslin's bioluminescent patterns shifted to something that might have been amusement. You are either the most brilliant diplomat I have ever met, or the most fortunate fool in galactic history. Can't I be both? I suppose you can. He paused. There will be challenges ahead. The Scoreth will not forgive this easily. Others will test your resolve. Membership in the Assembly is not a shield, Ambassador. It is a responsibility. We know, Sienna said. We're ready for it. As she walked back to her ship later that night, Dmitri fell into step beside her. We did it, he said quietly. Against every possible odd, we actually did it. We survived, Sienna corrected. Now comes the harder part. Living up to what we promised. Proving we deserve this seat. Building a future where human children don't have to grow up afraid of the stars. You think we can do it? Sienna looked out at the vast expanse of space visible through the station's transparent sections. Countless stars, countless worlds, countless possibilities. I think we're human, she said. We've survived ice ages and plagues and wars and our own worst impulses. We've reached for the stars from the moment we first looked up and wondered what was out there. We're stubborn and creative and absolutely terrible at accepting that something is impossible. She smiled. Yeah, Colonel. I think we can do it. 3 months later, Sienna stood in a newly constructed wing of Celestial Nexus Station. The human section, they were calling it. Offices and quarters and meeting rooms where human diplomats would work alongside their alien counterparts. It still felt surreal. A message arrived from Director Ramirez. The hidden fleets were being gradually revealed, transitioning from secret weapons to legitimate defense forces. The Assembly had even requested technical consultations about humanity's interdiction bypass technology. Sienna had politely declined to share that particular secret. Some cards you kept close to your chest. She thought about the people who had died at the border, the sacrifices that had made this moment possible. Their names were being inscribed on a memorial wall back on Earth. History would remember them as heroes, but they had died thinking themselves abandoned. That guilt would never leave her. She didn't want it to. It was important to remember what peace cost, to never take it for granted, to honor those who paid the price. Her communicator buzzed. Another assembly meeting, another negotiation about trade routes and colony rights and the 1,000 details of building a shared future. It would be hard work, frustrating work, work that would take decades or centuries to fully realize. But it was work worth doing. Sienna straightened her uniform and headed for the chamber. Humanity had earned its place among the stars. Now they had to prove they deserved to keep it. The galaxy watched and waited to see what humans would do next. And somewhere in the dark spaces between the stars, human ships moved silently, keeping watch, keeping faith, keeping the promise that no one would ever again mistake humanity's patience for weakness. The future was unwritten, full of challenges and possibilities in equal measure. But for the first time in a long time, Sienna Reeves allowed herself to hope. And hope, she had learned, was the most powerful weapon of all.